Welcome to geometry. So, recently we learned how to prove two triangles are congruent, right? We learned how to do that. In this case, we're going to learn to go beyond that. So, after we prove that two triangles are congruent, how do we prove the two corresponding parts are congruent? For example, how do we show that LO is congruent to ON? In this case, we're going to show that ML is congruent to MN. And we're going to be using this property, Cpctc, which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Well, right in the name, it tells you that if the triangles are congruent, then the corresponding parts are also congruent. And remember, angles are also corresponding, so corresponding just means in the same position. So I can say that L is congruent to N only if the two triangles are congruent. So let's see, how do we go about this proof? How do we show that ML is congruent to MN? Okay, so the first thing we want to do is provide ourselves with an outline of our goal. And so what is it that we want? Well, the first thing is to identify the given, right? The second thing that we want to do is there a congruent statement or can I write one based on the given? So, is there a congruence statement in the given or can I write one? And next, we have to prove that the two triangles are congruent using the congruence theorem. So, prove two triangles are congruent using the congruence theorems, right? And we know what the congruence theorems are. We've spoken about three so far, but there are more to come. And then state the proof statement and the reason. And then the lastly is state the proof and see this here is are going to be our last line. This right here is going to be our last line. So state the proof and the reason is Cpctc. And let's see how that works. Okay, so remember, our first thing to do is to just write your statement and reasons chart, and then we'll do our reasons. And we know our first one is pretty simple always. Our first one is just what the given is. So this entire thing here is given. And right now, I'm not even going to think about what that means. I'm just going to write it, okay, without even thinking about what it means because I know that that's always the first step. And then after I write it, only then I can start to think about what it actually means, okay? And I can start to mark up the diagram and all that stuff. So let's see. The reason here is, of course, given. Okay, so let's go through here. Identify the given. I have identified it. I have identified it. And here it is. Okay, there's my given. Now the next thing is, well, is there a congruent statement or can I write one? Well, I see a congruent statement here. That's check, sure, but this time they gave me two givens. So what does OM bisects angle LMN? Well, LMN is over here. And if it's saying that OM bisects this angle, then my congruence theorem is that these two angles, my congruence statement is that these two angles up here are going to be congruent. Okay, so far I have LOM, angle LOM, this angle right here is congruent to angle NOM. So these two are congruent. Okay, and now I have that these two are congruent. Great, so let's write that down. So angle LMO is congruent to angle NMO. And the reason for that is that OM bisects angle LMN. Great. Okay. So far, so good. Number 3. Okay. Well, now there are no more givens. I've used both of my givens. Check, check. I've used that. Now it's up to me to decide, well, what else is congruent here? Well, it has to be a side for sure, because the only thing I know is that I have angle, side, side, or side, angle, side. Those are the only 3 I can work with right now. Well, can it be side, side? Well, first of all, I already have 2 pairs of angles. So it's definitely not side, side. Is it side, angle, side? Do I even have one pair of sides being congruent? Of course not. So it's not that one. So it might be, it's going to be side, 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 angle. But where is the side? Simple. The side has to be in between the 2 angles. So here are the 2 angles, and the side, it's in between it. Well, OM. OM is congruent to OM, and we know why. It's congruent to OM because this is a reflection. Therefore, we have to use the reflexive property. And finally, I can say that my 2 triangles are congruent. Remember, I am not done here. That was the first thing I needed to prove. I needed to prove that triangle LMO is congruent to triangle NMO. And by what property? Well, by the angle side angle property. Lastly, right, state the proof, and the reason is Cpctc. Well, here's the proof. I'm done. I proved that my 2 triangles are congruent. If the 2 triangles are congruent, then the corresponding sides are also congruent. Well, it happens that LM is corresponding to MN. Therefore, they have to be congruent. LM is congruent to MN, and this is by Cpctc. Reason number 5. Okay? I know that you may have some trouble with this. Remember, copy everything down in your notebooks and we will discuss it in class if you have further questions. Make sure that you write down any questions that you have to be discussed in class.